My son and his wife mocked my new husband at my wedding. When the old man was revealed, I never imagined I would walk down the aisle again at 56. After losing my first husband, Daniel, I spent years believing that chapter of my life was closed forever. My world had become small work, home, lonely dinners, and occasional calls from my son, Marcus, who had grown too busy with his career and his new wife, Clara. I didn't blame him. Life moves forward. Mine just hadn't. Until I met Edward. It happened in the most ordinary place, the library. He was sitting alone at a wooden table, reading a weathered copy of Great Expectations. His glasses sat low on his nose, his silver hair slightly messy. When he noticed me glancing at the book, he smiled, gentle but full of quiet confidence. "You can sit here if you'd like," he said. Maybe it was the warmth in his voice, or maybe it was the way he really listened, but over the next months he slowly reawakened parts of me I thought had died with Daniel. We talked about books, family, regrets, and hopes we were both afraid to admit we still carried. Edward wasn't loud or flashy. He was steady, kind, a man who repaired broken clocks in his spare time and wrote letters instead of texts. But the moment my son met him, tension settled like a storm cloud. "He's too old, Mom," Marcus whispered the first night I introduced them. "Are you sure he's not after your savings? Guys like him, they look gentle but they're opportunists." Clara didn't help either. She leaned close to Marcus, giggling behind her manicured fingers as they whispered things they thought Edward couldn't hear. I saw the hurt in Edward's eyes. He never complained. When I told them we were getting married, the mockery only grew. "Mom, you barely know him," Marcus said. "He looks older than my grandfather," Clara added. "What will people think when they see him walking you down the aisle? They'll assume he's your nurse." Their words cut, but I refused to let bitterness overshadow the happiness I had finally found. Our wedding was simple, held in a garden behind a small chapel. Flowers, candlelight, and a soft violin playing everything I wanted. But the moment I stepped out in my dress, ready to walk toward the man who saved me from loneliness, I saw Marcus and Clara standing off to the side, laughing, pointing at Edward. "Look at the old man," Clara whispered loudly enough for guests to hear. "He'll need a cane to kiss the bride." I didn't know that in a few minutes, those cruel smiles would freeze in place because the truth about who Edward really was about to be revealed.
For a moment, I froze at the edge of the aisle, the bouquet trembling in my hands. I felt every pair of eyes turning toward Marcus and Clara as their laughter echoed like something sharp and cruel slicing through the soft beauty of the garden. My cheeks warmed with embarrassment, but before my emotions could spill over, I saw Edward lift his gaze toward me, and he smiled. Not a forced smile, not a wounded one, a calm, reassuring smile that said, "I'm here, and this moment belongs to us, not them." The violinist shifted melodies, and the guests began to rise to their feet. I inhaled slowly and stepped forward, one measured step at a time, but Clara wasn't finished. "Oh look," she whispered louder, nudging Marcus. "The old man is trying to stand up straight. Hope he doesn't break a hip before the vows." A few guests gasped. Someone asked them to stop. Marcus shushed them with a smug wave of his hand. I felt anger flare in my chest, and for a second, I almost turned back. Then something unexpected happened. The officiant cleared his throat, glancing nervously at the commotion, but Edward raised a hand gently toward him, signaling he would handle it. He stepped down from the small altar, his polished shoes crunching softly against the gravel path. He walked slowly toward Marcus and Clara, not with humiliation, not with irritation, but with the unshakable dignity he always carried. "Marcus," Edward said softly. "Clara, may I speak with you?" Clara rolled her eyes. Marcus crossed his arms. "What? You want to give us a lecture?" he snapped. Edward didn't flinch. He simply clasped his hands behind his back. "No, I just want to say something before I marry your mother." The garden went silent. Even the violinist lowered his bow. "I don't mind your jokes," Edward continued gently. "You don't know me yet. I am older. Yes, but age. Age is not a weakness unless someone chooses to weaponize it," Clara scoffed. "What does that even mean?" "It means," Edward said quietly, "I have lived a life you know nothing about." Marcus smirked. "Like what? Retired clock repairman? Grandpa hobbies and bedtime at 8. A few people murmured in disapproval, but Edward remained serene. "Well," he said, "today isn't meant to be about my past, but since you seem so curious." He paused. looking at both of them with a soft intensity. "You should know something." He turned slightly, raising his voice just enough for the guests to hear. "My name isn't just Edward Hale." He let the silence settle, and then added, "It's Dr. Edward Hale, former lead surgeon of St. John's Trauma Center, and the man who saved your father's life 18 years ago." The entire garden gasped. Marcus's smile vanished, and Clara's face drained of color. For a moment, no one moved. The wind seemed to still. The violinist lowered his bow completely, and even the petals scattered along the all seemed to freeze. Marcus stared at Edward as if he had misheard him. Clara blinked rapidly, her lips parting but no words forming. My heart thudded in my chest. Edward stepped back slightly so everyone could see him. "Yes," he repeated calmly, "I'm the surgeon who operated on your father after the highway crash. Your mother may remember me though at the time. We didn't exchange names. I remembered that night as if it were carved into my bones. Daniel had been brought to St. John's after a drunk driver hit his car head-on. I spent hours pacing the whole way, clutching the sleeves of my sweater, praying the doors would open with good news. A doctor had eventually come out tall, steady, compassionate, explaining the surgery had gone well, though complications still threatened him. That doctor, that voice, I had never connected it before. Marcus's face twisted. You're lying," he said, though it came out shaky. "You can't be the same man. That was years ago, 18. Edward confirmed. "Your father was 41. I remember because I had just turned 50. His soft smile returned, and because he was one of the hardest cases I ever handled. Clara swallowed, gripping Marcus's arm as if she needed something to steady her. Edward continued, "I didn't tell you all this sooner because I didn't want my past to influence how you saw me. I wanted to earn your trust on who I am now, not on what I once did." The guests murmured in astonishment. Even the officiant looked emotional. Marcus's posture sagged, his confidence crumbling. "You saved my dad," he whispered, as if he couldn't believe the words. Edward nodded. "Your father fought hard. I only did my part." He looked at Marcus gently. "He spoke of you during surgery prep. Said he hoped he'd make it home in time to help you build your school project, a wooden bridge, I think." Marcus's mouth dropped open. That's true." A wave of emotion washed over his face, shock, shame, confusion all tangled together. Clara tried to recover her composure. "Well, even if he was a doctor, that doesn't change." "Yes, it does." Marcus cut in sharply, surprising everyone. "It changes everything. You mocked him. We mocked him." His voice trembled. "We made fun of the man who saved my father's life. I watched my son, the boy I had raised, the one who used to run to his father after school, now grappling with guilt far heavier than anything I could have said to him." Edward stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Forgiveness is always an option," he said quietly, "for all of us." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. He tried to blink away. Clara stood stiffly, caught between pride and humiliation. But the moment wasn't over yet, because Edward turned toward the guests again, as if preparing to share something even more unexpected. "How?"
Edward's eyes softened as he looked at me first, then at Marcus, then at the guests who sat in stunned silence. The breeze rustled the garden leaves, brushing against the hanging lanterns that flickered faintly in the afternoon light. It felt as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting. "There is something else I need to say," Edward began, his voice low but steady. "Something I should have shared before this day, though I feared it might change everything." My heart tightened. What could be more than what he had already revealed? Edward took a slow breath. "When I left my position at St. John's, it wasn't only because of age. It was because I made a promise to someone." His gaze drifted to the ground for a moment, as if reliving a memory. "A promise to a man who was fighting for his life." My pulse quickened. "Daniel," he looked up again. His voice carried weight. "Your father, Marcus, your husband, Margaret asked me for something the night after his surgery." A soft gasp escaped me before I could stop it. "Daniel? He spoke to you again?" Edward nodded gently. "He did. When he woke, before the complications set in, he asked for the surgeon who had operated on him. He said he needed to speak with me privately." I pressed a hand to my chest. I had no idea this conversation ever happened. Marcus stepped forward slightly, his face pale. "What did he say?" Edward looked him straight in the eye. "He told me he was afraid not of dying, but of leaving you both without protection. He said he didn't know if he would survive the night, but he wanted someone with integrity to look after his family if the worst happened." The garden erupted into murmurs. My legs nearly gave out. Edward's voice softened even more. He asked me to promise that if fate ever brought me across his wife or his son again, I would help them, guide them, protect them. He paused, emotion tightening his throat. He didn't want you to be alone. Tears blurred my vision. Daniel had always been a protector, even in his final hours. Marcus covered his face with both hands. Clara stood beside him, silent and shaken. Edward continued, "When I met your mother, I didn't know who she was. But the more I learned about her, the more I sensed something familiar, a kindness that reminded me of that promise. Still, I said nothing, because I didn't want our relationship to grow from obligation or a vow made long ago." He turned to me. I wanted it to grow from love. My breath hitched. The guests were crying now too. And it did. Edward finished softly. "I love you, Margaret. Not because of a promise, but because you are the woman who brought me back to life."
Silence settled over the garden like a soft blanket, thick with emotion. I stood there, bouquet trembling slightly in my hands, unable to speak. Edward's confession struck at a part of my heart I had long sealed away, not in pain, but in reverence. The idea that Daniel, even in the final moments of his life, thought about our future, it broke something open inside me. Marcus slowly lowered his hands from his face, his eyes red, his voice shaking. "All these years, all this time, you knew something about my father that we didn't." Edward nodded gently. "Not everything. Only that he loved you both deeply, and that if life gave me the chance, I should step in not to replace him, but to protect what he cherished." Clara shifted uncomfortably beside him, her mascara slightly smudged. She finally whispered, We mocked you. I mocked you. And all along, you were someone who kept a dying man's final wish." Edward's expression remained warm, forgiving. "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we choose to do after them." Marcus swallowed hard, tears forming again. "Mom," he said, turning to me, voice cracking, "I'm sorry. I've been selfish. I thought I needed to protect you from being hurt again. I never stopped to think maybe you were choosing happiness. Real happiness." I stepped closer, brushing a tear from his cheek like I did when he was a boy. "Oh, Marcus, I don't blame you for wanting to protect me. But you forgot one thing." "What?" he whispered. "That I'm capable of choosing what's right for my heart. And Edward has given me nothing but peace." Edward's eyes softened even further, and for the first time since the ceremony began, the tension in the air slowly dissolved. Marcus turned to Edward. "I don't know how to fix what I said, what we did. But if you can forgive me, I'll try to be better." Edward placed a hand on his shoulder once more. "Forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something that's given. Consider it already done." At that, Marcus broke. He leaned forward and hugged Edward, a hesitant, awkward, but deeply emotional embrace. The guests erupted into gentle applause. Clara wiped her eyes too, stepping forward timidly. I'm sorry as well," she murmured. "I didn't know who you were." Edward chuckled softly. "You didn't need to know who I was, only who I am." The officiant cleared his throat, smiling now. "Shall we resume the ceremony?" Edward looked at me with that familiar, grounding tenderness. "Yes," I whispered, heart full. "Let's continue." And with hands trembling but hopeful, we turned back toward the altar together.
The officiant motioned for everyone to take their seats again, though many guests still dabbed at their eyes or whispered to one another about the shocking revelations they had just heard. The mood had shifted entirely where there had been tension. Now there was warmth, tenderness, and a sense of something sacred unfolding. Edward offered me his arm, and as I placed my hand in the crook of his elbow, he leaned closer and whispered, "Are you all right?" I nodded, though my voice trembled. "More than all right. I never imagined today would unfold like this." He smiled softly. "Life has its surprises." We reached the altar once more, and this time, the violinist resumed playing not the soft and certain melody from before, but a fuller, brighter one that lifted the very air around us. The officiant's eyes shone with emotion. "Marriage," he began, "is not only a union of two people, but a weaving together of journeys past, present, and future. Today, we witness the incredible way those journeys can intersect unexpectedly. Even years later, Edward gently squeezed my hand. The officiant looked at him. "Edward, please share your vows." Edward turned to face me fully. Up close, I could see the shimmer of emotion in his eyes. "Margaret," he said, his voice steady yet warm. "The day I met you in that library, I saw a woman who carried both strength and sorrow. You didn't hide your loneliness, nor did you let it define you. I admired that. And I admired the way you looked at the world still with hope, even if you didn't realize it." My breath hitched. "You brought peace into my life," he continued. "You gave me companionship, laughter, and a home I didn't know I was missing. I promise to spend the rest of my days making sure you never feel alone again. I promise to honor your past while building a beautiful future with you. And I promise above all to love you with gentleness, loyalty, and gratitude." Tears fell freely down my cheeks. The officiant nodded to me. "Margaret, your vows." I inhaled shakily. "Edward, after losing Daniel, I never thought love would come to me a second time. I had closed doors in my heart without realizing it. But you," I smiled through the tears, "you opened them quietly, patiently, with kindness. You reminded me that life doesn't end when grief arrives. It pauses. And sometimes someone gentle comes along to help it start again." He blinked, fighting his own tears. "I promise," I continued, voice trembling, "to love you without fear, to walk beside you without hesitation, and to be grateful for every day I get with you." A soft, heartfelt silence fell over the guests. The officiant clasped his hands. "Then, with the blessing of everyone here, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Edward leaned in, his lips brushing mine in a quiet, beautiful kiss. The garden erupted in applause. But the day wasn't done yet, because someone was about to interrupt the celebration with news none of us expected. The applause had barely begun to fade when a sharp, breathless voice carried across the garden. "Margaret! Edward!" Everyone turned. A young woman in her late 20s hurried toward us, her chest rising and falling with frantic breaths. Her dark hair was messy, her cheeks flushed, and she clutched a folder tightly against her chest as if afraid it might slip from her grasp. I blinked in confusion. "Emily?" Edward stiffened beside me. "What's wrong?" Emily had been one of Edward's closest former nurses at Steady John's, someone who still visited occasionally and who cared deeply for the patients Edward once saved. But I had never seen her like this, unsteady, desperate, almost trembling. She reached us, lowering her voice but not her urgency. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but Edward, you need to see this." It couldn't wait. The guests watched in silence, unsure if this was part of some unusual ceremony ritual. It wasn't. Edward gently released my hand and took the folder from Emily. He opened it slowly, his eyes scanning the pages. Then again, and again, his face drained of color. My heart thudded. "Edward? What is it?" He didn't speak right away. Instead, he closed the folder with a quiet, trembling breath. Emily touched his arm gently. "I told you this might happen. They've been trying to reach you for 2 days." Marcus stepped forward, protective instinct rising in him now that the tension between us had been mended. "Is he sick? Did something happen to him?" Edward finally met my eyes, and in them, I saw something I had never seen before. Not calmness, not confidence, not sorrow. Fear. "Margaret," he whispered, "I didn't want this to overshadow our wedding, but something from my past has come back. Something I thought I left behind when I retired." I stepped closer, gripping his hand. "Edward, you don't have to protect me anymore. Tell me." He swallowed hard. "The hospital conducted a long-term review of trauma cases from over a decade ago. One of my surgeries is under investigation." Shock rippled through the guests. Clara's eyes widened. Marcus stiffened. Emily spoke softly, filling the silence. "A patient's family has filed a formal complaint claiming the surgery was mishandled, and that negligence caused long-term damage." Edward shook his head slowly. "I don't remember an error. I never hid a mistake. But they want to reopen the case. And they want me present at the hearing tomorrow morning." I squeezed his hand. "We'll face this together." He looked at me with trembling gratitude. "I was afraid you'd regret marrying me right before the storm." I shook my head firmly. Edward, storms don't scare me. Losing you does. But even as I spoke those words, none of us understood just how deep the storm was about to become.
The celebration slowly dissolved into murmurs of concern. Guests lingered nearby, unsure whether to stay or give us privacy. Edward stood beside me, shoulders slightly hunched, the weight of the folder pressing down on him like a stone. Marcus stepped forward, placing himself protectively on Edward's other side. "We'll go with you," he said firmly. "You're not walking into that hearing alone." Edward gave a weak smile. "Marcus, it's your mother's wedding day. You shouldn't have to." "Edward," Marcus interrupted gently, "you saved my father's life. The least I can do is stand with you while you defend yours." Tears welled in Edward's eyes, but he nodded, grateful. Emily cleared her throat softly. "The hearing isn't just a review. The patient's family submitted new imaging, new testimony, and they're arguing malpractice. Depending on how it goes, they may push for charges." A chill swept through me. "Charges?" My voice cracked. "But Edward has never done anything unethical. Never." Emily's expression was pained. "I know, but hearings like this aren't about truth at first, they're about evidence, claims, and how aggressively the family wants to pursue the matter." "What case is it?" Edward asked quietly. "Whose surgery?" Emily hesitated, then opened the folder again. She pointed to the top page. Edward's face went pale. I leaned closer and read the name. "Thomas Delaney." My breath caught. "Wait, wasn't he?" Marcus answered for me. "He was Dad's business partner. They had a falling out years before the accident." Edward shut his eyes, recalling the memory. "He came in after a manufacturing accident. Severe internal bleeding. Complicated. I operated for hours." He looked at Emily. "But he survived." "Yes." Emily confirmed. "He lived for 10 more years. So how can this be negligence?" I asked, stunned. "How can a decade later someone claim malpractice?" Emily exhaled shakily. "His daughter is claiming he lived those 10 years with chronic pain, organ damage, and that your decisions during surgery caused irreversible harm. But he never filed a complaint," Edward whispered. "He never even hinted at suffering because of me." Emily hesitated. "He did, once. A small complaint about reduced function. The hospital dismissed it." She lowered her gaze. "But his daughter now claims the hospital buried evidence." Edward's shoulders slumped. "So they'll try to build a case against both the hospital and me." I took his hands in mine. "Edward, we know who you are. Your patients know who you are. This accusation doesn't define you." He met my eyes, his voice breaking. "But it threatens everything. My reputation, my legacy, our peace." I pressed my forehead to his. "Then we fight." Marcus stepped closer. "We fight together." And in that moment, amid the fading flowers and silent guests, our newly formed family stood united without knowing that tomorrow's hearing would reveal something far more explosive than any of us imagined.